Hello, and thanks for joining us today for this webinar in partnership with Latana on consumer self-awareness, how brands need to change tactics in 2022. I'm Jenny Baker, Assistant Editor at The Drum, and in this session, we're going to examine the changing behaviour of the 2022 consumer and explore how brands need to be thinking about changing tactics in their marketing strategies to better connect with their target audiences. So joining me today to share their thoughts and insights on this very topic, I'm delighted to introduce you to our three panellists. Anjali Mullins, Chief Marketing Officer and Chief Growth Officer, Latana, Bisha Cadell, Director of Business Marketing at Pinterest, and Louise Trone, Vice President, International Marketing at Kpis. Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi, Jenny.
Hello.
Now, before we get stuck into the panel discussion, the team at Latana have conducted some research into the changing behaviour of the 2022 consumer to form the basis of today's conversation, which Anjali is going to give us a first look at, hot off the press. So without further ado, over to you, Anjali.
Thank you, Jenny. Super excited to be here and super excited to talk with everybody on this panel today about consumer self-awareness. As everybody knows, in 2022, things have changed tremendously. So we're going to be talking about some of the key themes. As marketing and brand leaders, I know that we are all asking ourselves, can we change course with this new consumer behavior? Can we match it? Can we adapt to it? The answer is, of course we can. And so here at Latana, we've come up with some of the key themes for 2022 and some of the key insights. In order to do this, we did research in both the US and the UK. We kicked off the year in January with this research, and we have three major themes. So we are going to be focusing the discussion today on mental health, which of course should hopefully be no surprise to anybody. Then we're going to keep giving a little bit of insights on sustainability and then dive into online shopping, because that is a huge, huge theme for last year. And then it's also going to be a tremendous theme for this year in 2022. So we'll kick off on some of our insights for mental health. Mental health, of course, should be no surprise to anyone. It's now a clear focus for all of our consumers. The past 2 years have taught us that from the pandemic. But here in 2022, let's look at some of the key areas that we want to be targeting. So the majority of our respondents, both in the US and the UK, said mental health will absolutely be a focus. However, what are some of the key demographics? Who is really responding to this? What we found is actually women and people living in urban areas. And so we define that, of course, by people living in dense urban populations are focusing more on their mental health. However, we're going to go into a little bit of insights there on people focusing on physical health in just a minute, but those are the top two demographics for mental health. Now, we know that brands focused on mental health can target better emotionally to relate to their audiences. What we found at Latana in our survey is 60% of our respondents stated that they're very likely to purchase a product in 2022 that's focused on their mental health and well-being. And this was confirmed by the majority of our respondents in both of the US and the UK. However, a little insight here, we have the best audience to target, and then also what we would say is the worst, or audiences that may not be responding to this. So the best one to target is urban, so people that live in this high density urban areas. But the one that might be a little bit interesting and might not respond as much as baby boomers. And so for our studies purposes, we identified baby boomers as 58 to 76. So that'll be an interesting one to talk about. Next in our insights, our consumers, of course, found that mental health and work-life balance are going hand in hand. 51% of our respondents said that they're focusing on improving their work-life balance in 2022. And the audiences who are looking to do this, males, people in the United States, and also people in urban areas. And a little bit more of a breakdown, how that plays in consumer spending and how people and consumers are spending their time. So again, we kicked off this survey just now at the beginning of the year in January. So this snapshot of the first month of the year, 43% of our respondents have already bought something for themselves this year. And 42% of our respondents stated they already have spent more time on themselves this year. So of course, when you kick off the new year, setting new goals and plans is a huge priority. But who are these individuals doing this? Some in the US, so 44%. Gen Z, so this one's an interesting demographic to look at. We're defining that as 18 to 25. Millennials, we're defining that as 26 to 41. And then people who are going after higher education. So this is above a bachelor's degree into your master's and even PhD. All right, so we talked a little bit about mental health, and we talked about maybe baby boomers being tougher in that area, but they actually played really well on physical well-being. So we actually asked a question on what do consumers plan to do in 2022, not only with mental health, but with their physical well-being. And a huge amount of respondents have responded very positively to this. And everybody, it seems, wants to focus on their physical well-being. So we have males, people both in the US and the UK, our baby boomers, people in urban areas, rural areas, higher education, lower education, so pretty much almost everyone. But that's very different than the demographic and the segments that are focusing on the mental well-being. So females, Gen Z, so again, that age group of 18 to 25, and millennials, 26 to 41. Those are the key targets and demographics focused on the mental well-being. So we thought that was a really interesting insight there. All right, sustainability. So the next topic, we just did a couple of key questions. So sustainability over the past decade has always been a hot topic and a needle mover, but we just wanted to check in with our respondents in the US and UK to see where that is for 2022. So overwhelmingly, no surprise, the majority of people believe it's important to track environmental impact in 2022, with 60% of our respondents believing it's important to track that environmental impact. And then again, any key demographics here, both the US and the UK, but we also saw millennials and people in urban areas. Now, there's a difference of tracking environmental impact and improving environmental impact. So we saw this as a really key insight. Even though the majority of people think it's great to track it, we saw 70% people attributed some sort of importance to this, improving their environmental impact. And this was really key with millennials and with people in rural areas. So we noticed the difference on tracking in urban, but improving the impact in rural areas. So some key insights on sustainability. Last but not least, we have online shopping. So through the pandemic and now starting in 2022, online shopping has exploded. It's already been there from e-commerce, but it's becoming even larger and having a greater impact on everyday life. So we asked a couple of questions to people again in the US and the UK. And of course, speed and flexibility seem to be playing a really key role here. We asked some contextual information to understand how consumers felt about this. And three main phrases came up. Consumers want fast delivery, flexible delivery, and secure tracking. And so we found that 58% of our respondents stated that fast delivery was the most important factor for them. So it's highlighting this need for speed for today's consumer and fast delivery. Now, who exactly is responding to this? So we also have secure packaging. So fast delivery and secure packaging is a winner. In the US, 36%, Gen Z, again, that 18 to 25 age group, and millennials, 26 to 41. But the interesting thing is, even though people want things to be delivered super quick and they want things in secure packaging, the sustainable delivery route was not actually a driving factor for them. So even though we have a majority of our respondents saying sustainability is important, environmental impact is important, we find that a lot of our respondents weren't necessarily focusing on sustainable delivery routes. So we found that was extremely interesting. All right, how do we reach these consumers? So we added a couple questions about social media because we know this has been, of course, a key channel and a key way to reach consumers, but we wanted to check in and see how effective this was. So you can see here an example of the buying funnel. We find that about 48% of consumers that we surveyed have browsed a brand's social media page. However, we see them dropping off the funnel. So only 44% are visiting the brand store via social media platform, and then only 33% are making a purchase via social media platform. And who is likely to convert? Who is this most resonating with? Audiences in the Gen Z category, again, so that 18 to 25 age demographic. Now, there's still huge potential to sell through social media. We found, of course, some respondents did not respond to this question, or they said that maybe they weren't using social media. So we actually have a group, 21% of our respondents haven't taken part in any of the social media activities. So that's another audience that we can look to convert. However, when we look on who are the ones that are converting with social media, we find of the Gen Z population, females, people in the United States, and people in urban areas. All right, couple last tid point here is that we have secure data. So data has been something that with social media and all kinds of different platforms that we're advertising towards has become more and more of an issue for people. So we also found that secure data will be key to convincing consumers to shop online, with 57% of our respondents feeling they're very informed or somewhat informed of their rights, and 41% of our respondents indicated they would become more protective over their data. And the interesting thing between the US and the UK is this was actually a little bit more overwhelming for people in the United States at 48%. So some really interesting insights, again, on mental health, sustainability, and online shopping. So really excited to get into the discussion today and talk about how we want to change our consumer behavior trends.
Thank you so much, Angela. That's a great, great way to set the scene for this conversation. And you've really nicely summarized some of the key themes there. So I guess, welcoming back Louise and Visha, and to open this up to you, what do you make of those findings? Are you surprised by any of it? And how does it fit with other consumer trends you've been seeing? Louise, do you want to kick that one off for us?
Yeah, I can kick off. Firstly, thanks ever so much. I think all of those insights were wildly fascinating and really, even at Headspace, we can take a lot of them on board and kind of apply them to our thinking as we go into 2022. I sort of had 4 quick points just to pick up on that I thought were particularly interesting from my point of view. The first one that I wanted to mention is that at Headspace, we saw our D2C business grow significantly over the pandemic, as many health and wellness brands and businesses saw. And we're actually seeing that trend continue to evolve and increase through to 2022 as people's expectations of work-life balance and their commitment to that personally only grows. And what we're also seeing at Headspace is that beyond this, consumers have expectations that brands, products, and services that they're engaging with prioritize this in a lot of their innovation and how they're evolving, and also in their communication to them across channel marketing. And so the kind of feedback from our side is that this will only significantly increase as we go into the next few years. And the question is kind of how do you show up as a brand and as a product to make sure that you're playing into this, not only expectation, but critical demand to show up with authenticity here. The second piece that I wanted to mention is in 2021 specifically, our Headspace for Work client grew by 6-fold. And I think that not only shows that the appetite from employees is there for kind of brands and companies to put their well-being first, but also from an employee standpoint, the request and the kind of appetite for people to have that built into their everyday life from an employee standpoint as well is paramount. The third point that I wanted to mention that you brought up was around fast delivery. And although we're not a delivery or a retail service, what we're seeing is that's playing into the general kind of psychology of young consumers, Gen Z today. So this expectation for not necessarily instant gratification, but immediate satisfaction when a brand shows up in their content, in their product, and moreover, the kind of experiences that they deliver as a brand service. And I really believe that expectation for young consumers to understand what a brand does, why it's relevant to them, how it can add value to their lives will only increase as we go into 2022 even more. And then the last point that I thought was really interesting when you talked about consumers dropping off the funnel when it comes to certain channel activity and behavior is that I think that comes back to brands showing up with real authenticity in the right channels. You have to have the right creative, you have to have the right content strategy, and you really have to be communicating the right things in order to engage and kind of hold on sustainability-wise to those consumers and the expectation for them to spend against that. So I think for me, that piece is about showing up with the right communication in the right channel at the right point, rather than sort of peanut butter spreading all of your communications across every marketing channel and kind of hoping for engagement to fall off the back of that.
Thanks, Louise. I mean, there's so many things that are changing this year. I think one of the biggest ones to start off is the mental health piece. And we saw, especially Gen Z, they want fast delivery. They are focusing on mental health. They also want work-life balance. And like you said, it's about the authenticity. And I think what we're finding in the marketing space is brands are starting to connect more with the feeling that people have. And it's not just the product and what it can do for you, but it's that feeling, and that feeling is spreading through the work life, through how consumers are buying things. So it's definitely something that brand and marketing leaders are now focusing on, is that feeling and connecting with people.
So I just thought I think I had a couple of observations actually on some of the research that you presented, Anjali. And I thought, actually, I was listening so intently that I was actually taking notes when you were going through some of that stuff, because a lot of the work that you presented, I kind of felt like that makes sense. That's where we are right now. What you're saying sort of reinforces everything that we've been seeing at Pinterest. So as everybody knows, Pinterest is a place for inspiration and ideas and looking for the things that you actually want to find and make happen in your real life. So one of the things that we've actually discovered over the course of the last year or so is that a lot of the seeking in inspiration was actually translated into looking for inspiration around emotional well-being, mental health, and things like that. We saw search rises going high around, Sunday rest routines grew by 7 times, which is 700%. De-stressing tips grew by 12% and 12 times actually. Optimism tattoos grew by 3 times. Self-care quotes for mental health, resting quotes. People are looking for a safe haven and a safe place right now. And I think a lot of what you were saying was really, really resonating with me, because it's the data that we're actually seeing through real-time search. The other thing I was thinking about was when you were talking about shopping, which is so interesting to hear about fast shopping. And I think actually, let's be honest, we all want the time that you want to buy something and you get that thing that you want, you actually want it quite quickly, don't you? So that all makes sense. But I found it really fascinating when you talked a little bit about actually how social media is a reason for a lot of the drop-offs that you're seeing for when a customer gets to the end of the purchase funnel. So that's so different to what we're seeing. So I found that quite fascinating, mainly because people on Pinterest are always shopping. And because of the nature of the platform, it's an ideas, space, it's a space for inspiration. It's the mindset is very different here. And it got me thinking a little bit about, it is definitely about authenticity and, making sure that the story you tell is really important, but it's also about the consumer mindset. And I sometimes think we forget about that when we're putting our ads in specific places. So if you're somewhere where you are there to read the news or go socialize with your friends or whatever it is, are you in a shopping mindset? And if you think about yourself in real life, you're out with a shopping mindset. So I think one of the observations that I found working at Pinterest is that 75% are always shopping, and we have bigger baskets off the back of that. So there's a long-term customer loyalty. So it's just really interesting to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, thanks, Visha. I mean, one of the insights that we found is, of course, Gen Z. They are very heavy into social media, but they're also the demographic that says they want mental health. They want work-life balance. So from a marketing perspective, again, how do we relate to them? And then we also had that 21% of respondents saying, hey, we don't do any of this at all. So how can we as consumer brands tap into this demographic as well? And then there was also that kind of juxtaposed difference between urban millennials and Gen Z demographic, and then people in the rural environment, and also baby boomers who wanted to focus on their physical well-being. So I think just really, gauging the right messages with the right audiences. So that's something that we do here at Latana, we help brands with, but at the same time, understanding, are people fatigued with certain platforms? I mean, with basically with the pandemic, everybody's online, everybody's doing video calling, everybody's on social media. So it's more about connecting your brand with the feeling. So I think what we've seen in past years is this product pushing all the time. And, for all of us and all consumers who are on social media platforms, we love them, but we want to see that feeling. And so you're seeing all kinds of companies nowadays, big and small, kind of starting to change that trend now from the product to the feeling to connect with consumers.
Absolutely. One thing I think I didn't explain and clarify about Pinterest is we don't really count ourselves as social media, which is, so some of the things that you're saying sort of resonates with that. There's nothing really social about Pinterest. You're there for yourself. So totally get into that.
I think we're similar to that. We see ourselves as a lifestyle brand and platform. And I think you're right, Anjali, in terms of the way we need to be thinking about the expectations of consumers is the content and the service and the product that you offer them. It almost has to do one of two things or both. It has to educate people on how and why and what about this brand is going to add so much value to your life within the spaces that you talked about earlier, whether that's mental health, whether it's sustainability, whether that's kind of a more political stance around climate change, for example. And the other is how are you going to make sure that they're emotionally connected to this? So do I understand the product? Is it clear to me what this is? Even when it comes down to kind of the visual kind of content ad marketing that we do, making sure that people understand that we're a lifestyle platform, but we're also an app, so that we're not losing people as they think through how to reach us and what the next kind of call to action is in terms of them downloading or engaging with the content. And I think if you can really nail what that emotional connectivity is and what's the connective tissue between what people care about and what you stand for as a product, and then the emotional sort of understanding of how people are going to be brought into that so that they become long-lasting advocates and then share your brand value to others, is a really key component of success. And for us, we talk a lot about at Headspace at the moment of kind of looking at the intersection between performance and purpose, knowing that growth and the inevitability of growth and the ambition that we have at Headspace to continue to grow and bring more mental health support to more people around the world, it can't be cannibalized by this relentless commitment to growth without purpose. We showed up for a fundamental reason, and our core mission and vision will always be to improve the health and happiness of the world through mental health tools and support. And the question that we always come back to, whether it's content or a campaign or even internal culture and hiring, is where are we sitting within that intersection between performance and purpose? And are we making sure, if we had a Venn diagram in front of us, that our customer is at the forefront of that and our consumer experience remains what we wake up for every day, in the hope that as we grow, we can bring more mental health support to more people around the world. But I think making sure that we understand as products and as brands and as marketeers what that means for your particular service or business is really critical.
Louise, that's just really well said. And it's actually one of the things that we think about so much when it comes to mental health. I mean, it's more young people are online more than ever before. And mental health is declining amongst this group of people, like you've actually seen in the research that, Angie, you've just presented. And that's a problem. That's something we've got to solve for. And I think, yes, it's definitely down to making sure that you resonate with the brand that you want to, or the product that you want to use. But the data is telling us something, and we need to listen to that. So one of the things that we think about, not just from a brand perspective, but also a platform perspective, is taking action. So we launched Compassionate Search a few years back so that you can actually be served mental health resources whenever you're searching for something that you are, concerned about and things like that. So, by its very nature, Pinterest is there to help you. So that was something that was really significant and really important for us that we put in place. And, we've also looked at research too that shows that Gen Zs, like the research that, you've just presented, during the pandemic, Gen Zs didn't stop dreaming or planning for the future. And we knew that, but we also knew that they needed a place to find those, a good, positive and inspiring place to go and do that too. So we thought quite a lot about what time really meant. Time is really, really precious to us. And it's something that you just can't give up freely. So being able to be a resource to young people specifically that are looking for mental health, support and actually more interesting ways of spending their time was really, really important, because it's what brings them purpose too. So we did do a lot of marketing actually to sort of revive our messaging and talk to this audience quite a lot.
It's really great, Risha. And I mean, with Pinterest, one of the things I love is just the connection. It's all about how you think and how you feel and resonating with that. So for me personally, it's your dream board, based together. And it's one of those things, especially over the past 2 years, people need a place where they can put that focus and put those dreams. So it's super, super important. One of the things that we found in our research is we found that now marketing is changing from putting out a campaign and seeing people how they respond to that campaign to how people feel and think about your brand. So this is one of the things that we focus at Latana. We have brand awareness, associations, and KPIs. And so it's really about marketing and brand leaders understanding not just what the brand is and the brand mission and vision, but it's about how consumers think and feel about it. What's that connection? And that's actually what's driving those campaigns. So exactly like you were saying, Risha, really important.
The only other thing that I wanted to add there, which I think is really important, and it sort of builds on that point as well, Angeli, is the physical and mental well-being space is clearly not going to slow down in terms of its growth and people's expectation of brands showing up there. But the other place that I think it's really powerful to think about is society and kind of your community marketing on a much broader level, because I think a lot of the knock-on effects, mental health wise, that we're saying were informed or directly a result of what happened during COVID, financial stresses, pressure if you were isolating on your own. A lot of the last 2 years have kind of created this scenario where people are putting more pressure on their physical well-being. They are struggling more with their mental well-being. And so the question for us often is, how do we show up in society so that we are delivering for the community on a level that isn't so unattainable and so aspirational that you just see a big billboard with, this is what Headspace deliver and this is why our product will help you, that we're actually integrating our content and our product mindset. And a lot of the kind of core focus of mental health is around getting people to stop and reflect and to take moments to stay present, and it's the same sort of conversation we're having around escapism. And, we're almost bringing these environments to consumers so that they can build better blocks around how they deliver their kind of everyday lives. And I think how we show up in society and then how that translates to marketing to the community doesn't necessarily mean individual bespoke marketing, but it really, for us, it focuses on how are you showing up with impact to everyday people. Obviously, there will always be a space for high spend, mass market advertising, and those things work to some degree. But what we're starting to see is that the real impact and the real knock-on effect growth-wise is coming from when we marry those big kind of hero campaigns with the everyday community marketing and the ambassadors in those communities that are actually showing up for people in their everyday lives.
That's exactly right. And now what we're seeing, Louise, is companies are focusing on individual people and individual stories. So not just taking celebrities or, people who are famous, but taking individual people in the community, sharing their struggles, sharing their stories. And that's why this is becoming alive and it's resonating with consumers. And also people are sharing very personal stories about their mental health, their struggles, some case their physical health. And these stories are impacting with consumers. And so we're finding this fundamental change in not only brands and how they're marketed, but just like you were saying, campaigns and how we're putting the message out into the universe.
Yeah, and I'd love to actually jump in here just to hear your thoughts on what brands can we learn from, who is doing this well, and, this whole like emotional connection with consumers. I wonder, do any of you have any examples you can share on what lessons can we learn from them?
So Maltesers did a really great campaign actually about postpartum depression. They did a great campaign. They had a huge billboard up, in the UK talking about, a child that was just born and talking about depression and how that was basically a huge thing and to not be afraid of it. So everybody, celebrates the birth of a new child, but they don't realize that, the parents can go through a really tough time. So that was really interesting. Maybelline actually did a campaign, and of course they're targeting young girls, young teenage girls. So basically, standing together, talking about how society has so many expectations of them. So putting real live, and again, we were just talking about this, real live consumers and talking about their stories as well, and all the different types of challenges that these girls were struggling with. It's okay to not look like fashion models. It's okay to be yourself. You are beautiful just for who you are. So these are the types of campaigns that we're starting to see now. And we also see it in the sporting arena. Tennis players coming out saying that they don't want to do press conferences, due to their mental health. We're starting to see it everywhere. And I think the more that it's happening, the more it's letting everybody know it's okay. And then the more people feel that it's okay, then again, the more people are bringing this up. So again, this is super important for consumer companies and also for brand and marketing leaders.
One of the campaigns that we ran over the last year called Find Some Headspace, and it was an aggregation of all the letters, emails, text messages that our consumers and people that have benefited from the product sent to us. And we kind of worked with our community to say, we want to create this campaign where we're telling real people's stories of not just overcoming mental illness or mental struggles, but actually seeing that as a journey that we all go through every day and something that will always have to be managed. And we sort of collected all of these conversations and stories and pieces of feedback and worked with these direct everyday people who were actually receiving kind of beneficial support from the content and the experiences in app. And the response to it was just incredible in terms of the knock-on effect, not only on the impact of kind of people's feelings towards the brand, but growth in general, because I think people want to relate to the impact, and they want to know and they want to feel that when they are downloading or engaging or buying a product, that it's not just, you know, this hugely far away aspirational person that is using it, that it is actually everyday people like themselves. And I think that's one of the beauties of social media, you know, for all of its perils. I think, you know, platforms that, you know, like Instagram and others are really democratizing access to a plethora of conversations that we just wouldn't have access to engage with before. And I think that came first, you know, and then the brands and advertising industry went, hold on a second, this kind of relatable, raw, almost exposing vulnerability is actually what people are engaging with and sharing. And that's where all these visceral moments are coming from. And the advertising industry really lifted that and said, how can we create kind of a bigger scale impact moment with this? But I really believe that that's where the industry is going to move. And I think we will move away from celebrity. And I think we will move even closer towards everyday people with everyday issues, challenges, successes, and really heroing the everyday person. And we're seeing lots of brands, you know, outside of ours, eBay, Apple, weaving this into all of their advertising. And one particular brand that I just personally love, Patagonia, you know, they have done that since day one. They've never shied away from putting, you know, their mission and social impact and their everyday employees at the forefront of their brand. And even last Black Friday, they donated 100% of their profits towards various charities supporting climate change, and got their employees to explain why that was so important to them in terms of, you know, how they felt about the brand and how engaged they were with the work they do. And I think we'll see a lot more of that in the coming years.
Actually, that championing the everyday is something that's really, really important, and actually something that we think about a lot over here when it comes to the casting for our own brand campaigns, and but also how we think about like the nature of our platform. So we, you know, because we care so much about inspiration being at the heart of everything we do, we did actually ban weight loss ads. So because of the fact that we didn't really want people to feel body shamed or feel like they can't be themselves. And that's really, really important to us. And when we're going through our own discussions around what kind of, the casting for our own ads, we always say everyday people, because Pinterest is for everyone. So quite naturally, you need to show the people that actually use your platform. That is just basics. But also diversity is massive for us too, because, you know, the world is just so colourful and we don't represent that enough. So that's really, really important to us too. The one thing to mention around like a campaign that's actually done really well, we've launched a couple of campaigns at the end of last year. So if I can selfishly mention those as well, which is we launched a campaign called You Might Surprise Yourself, you know, back to my point earlier on around Gen Zs really continuing to dream and plan and look for destinations and what ideas. That whole campaign was around finding an idea that you actually may surprise you and take you down the route that you want to go down to get to where you want to. So it was launched for that reason, but also we launched a campaign around shopping. The whole nature of that campaign that we launched at the end of last year was called Find What You Actually Love. Because although, yes, we do love fast shopping, we also want to find things that we actually love and like brings us joy and delight. And the whole thing around that campaign was to remind people that, you know, shopping is also a fun thing to do, even though we can't actually actively go out and do it on a regular basis as we used to do back in the day. And then I think a campaign that really surprised me was I was on the tube and I saw this big outdoor ad for Virgin Atlantic, and it was three women that were, you know, usually actually quite like just normal women. Actually, you know, they weren't skinny. They were three gorgeous Black women on like sunning themselves. They looked like they were friends. They were having a good time. And I just, the first thing I thought about when I looked at that, I thought, how unusual for a travel ad to look like that. Because your natural inclination when you're thinking about traveling is going, well, I'm just going to starve myself. I'm going to get whatever, you know, I need to find the best holiday clothes. But actually the whole point around that ad was just like, there were three women that were best friends that just wanted to go sun themselves somewhere nice and just think about themselves, and they didn't care about anyone else. And I just think that is what a holiday should be all about. And I just loved it so much. It was really it was really encouraging body positivity. It was there, really big. And I just felt so warm towards that ad. And I wish I could see more of that, actually. That's what I thought.
There's more and more coming out. I mean, in the fashion industry, in addition to the travel industry, we're starting to see what I call real people. And people are resonating with that. And it kind of goes back to the insight that we had from Latana, the 60% of consumers already in 2022 are saying they're more likely to purchase something, from a brand that relates to their mental health and well-being. And I definitely think that this is the connection. People find, okay, it's better for their mental health to see brands do advertisements of people that look like them, have gone through struggles like them. So this is all part of that. So it's super, super valuable.
I think the one space that's slightly untapped there, just in terms of, what I hope to see, and I think you'll see more brands coming to the forefront here, is around the climate change space. I think there's been a lot of conversation over the last few years within the fashion industry specifically, with regards to the circular economy and sustainability. But I think more broadly, our kind of one of our biggest facing issues is climate change. And we seem to be making some, not enough and not fast enough, but some progress with gender equality. We seem to be making some, but not enough, again, progress when it comes to diversity, both of color, of gender, of schools of thought, privilege. But I do feel like the entire climate change space and brands that show up with authenticity there, we're going to see a lot more of that. And I know a lot of my friends who work at, or kind of network friends who work at My Teresa or Net-a-Porter, have been kind of talking to me a lot about this real ambition to show up and be wholly sustainable, but the real challenge to actually do that completely authentically. But I know a lot of brands behind the scenes are looking at the best ways to do that, knowing that that is a market space that especially Gen Z and millennials are incredibly passionate about, and that has a knock-on effect on their mental well-being as well.
We're actually seeing that in searches, actually. So right now, we're seeing that over 80% of people that come to Pinterest actually have changed their behaviors around sustainability. They're looking for brands that make an effort to, think about their recycling, their packaging and things like that. Most pinners, like 2 and 3, have actually started to recycle in the last year. So that's true to the way that consumers are behaving right now.
We also saw that reflected in the data. So, 70% of consumers say sustainability is absolutely important. They resonate with it. The key insight, though, I know that as brands, we usually target urban millennials or people in urban areas. But what the data showed us from this month in January is people in rural communities. I think this is the area that's also being left out. And it's an area that can have a huge impact. So just something to note, how do we get to those consumers and how do we relate to them?
And on that, I think just to add one other piece, I think it's about identifying what is the right channel or conversation around things like sustainability for you to show up in as a brand. So, for us we're a content platform. And a lot of people might think, how on earth would you show up within this conversation with authenticity, but also with relevancy? And one of the things that we're working on producing at the moment, which will go live just before the summer, is a whole content suite around climate change and nature and understanding the conversations around that in conjunction with the knock-on effects on anxiety or social pressures, or sort of this feeling of not being able to do enough, when a lot of the pressures and conversation in the news agenda is that climate change is inevitable and it's increasing faster than we can imagine, and we don't have the means or resources to slow. All of these pieces cause incredible amounts of anxiety and stress within everyone today. And I think for us, that's how we show up and go, this is the conversation that people are having. These are the anxieties or the stress points that people are facing. How can we use our science-backed data, our science-backed content, the understanding of what it means to feel stressed and anxious and how the content can support with that, and show up in a conversation that makes sense for us as a content platform, not necessarily saying, we're going to launch a capsule collection of merch that is Headspace branded, that is fully sustainable. And when you receive it, you can plant a tree alongside that. These are ideas that would be great if we wanted to do them, but they don't come back to our core value proposition of a brand and product, which is content led. So I did want to mention that I think it's important to go, if you're showing up in that conversation, whether it's gender equality, body diversity, climate change, that you do so in a way that makes sense for your product. And that's where kind of the knock-on effects on authenticity and engagement will just increase.
It's really interesting. Actually, a couple of years ago, Latana produced a sustainability perception index, and we went through basically top 100 companies that are perceived sustainable. So it was the interesting piece of companies that are perceived sustainable versus the companies that weren't. So there was some kind of interesting juxtapose. For example, Tesla was perceived super sustainable, but some of the core German automakers, your Mercedes, Audis, et cetera, were not. And then you had a lot of the tech companies at the top because they did great marketing and campaigns about programs within their own companies and what they're doing. But then when you looked at what is factually happening in the marketplace, some of those companies, so for example, Apple is a notable one, not as sustainable as it could be. So I think it's interesting, the perception of sustainability versus what brands and companies are actually doing.
I love that. I think also, I'm just going to add in 1+1 because it's such an important topic. I'm so passionate about it. I think also thinking about sustainability, like off your product and business services, but also internally. We talk so much around like, how can we be more sustainable to our consumers? But I also think, the concept of sustainability is, how can we create long-lasting, consistent change that, will evolve over time and do good for the humans, planets that are all kind of existing here. And I think looking at how your internal culture, how your employee systems, and how that will affect sustainability off platform as well as on your platform, I think is really important, kind of looking at internal culture and also this kind of notion of the great resignation, which a lot of companies are going through at the moment.
The other thing I was just going to add on, as probably a bit of a build on everything else that everyone says so far, is also how you work with other brands to share these insights and make sure that they make for the platform as you would want. So for example, although I wear a marketing hat, I also wear a media and a hat too. So, we work very closely with brand partners to actually say, this is what people are looking for. They're looking for a greener way of living. And this is something you can offer them. So that's something that's really important in terms of like, how do you marry the values of a brand with the needs of a consumer with the platform that you're on. So it's one ecosystem. And I think versus just thinking about it in that sort of silo space of, telling the story and hoping for the best, it's almost like creating that safe space and that safe haven. It is a three-way ecosystem that we've got to work towards. So I think that's really important for us when we're talking to brand partners. And, we're making some thoughts around our own sort of marketing too. I think it's really kind of fun whenever someone comes and says like, let's do some DM and send out some swag. And most of the time I'm sitting there going like, this doesn't play well to my ethics right now, because should we go plant a tree or do something? But like, how do we start to make sure that even our marketing efforts are, emulating some of those things that we've just talked about, which is like being sustainable, but still being what marketing's supposed to be about, like reaching customers in a really joyful, delightful way with storytelling at the heart of it. And you don't have to spend a lot of money and not think about sustainability to be able to do that, I think.
It's really nice because it's one of the core things that we focus on at Latana. It's kind of like the last area of marketing that has been untouched. We have social listening on one piece and share of voice. We have all kinds of campaigns and data analytics, to measure those campaigns. But really now it's about what consumers feel and think about your brand and what are the associations. So Visha, just like you're saying, if you're doing a campaign, what's the associations that your consumers are going to have with your brand because of that? Do they see you as more sustainable? Do they see you as progressive, this or something else? And so these are, the kind of KPIs that we're really focusing on at Latana, and it really matches what you're saying that consumers want. And so again, consumer behavior trend of 2022. To focus on this one.
I could listen to you all day. This is so fascinating. We're running out of time, unfortunately. So I guess to kind of close us off, if we go back to the theme of the session, how brands need to change tactics in 2020. You've given us loads of great insight there, but I wonder if you could kind of pull that into one kind of key takeaway for us. What advice would you share with brands as they navigate through 2022? And Visha, I'll come to you first. You don't have to do this.
No, I'm doing that +1 against everything. I just agree with everybody. Well, I guess the thing that I would take away is like, we've seen that, and from our own data as well, we ran a piece of work last year where we surveyed our users and found that a lot of people are saying that the internet is a dark and scary place right now. And that was really quite was quite heartening actually to see. Like, it was really quite sad for us to realize the space that we're in. So I guess my key takeaway from the conversation that we've already had is that you don't actually have to sacrifice your brand values for gaining out ROI. So don't ignore what consumers are trying to tell us right now. Listen to this research, listen to this data. You have to make some active choices that enforces a better, a more positive and more inspiring life. And actually, to be able to do that, we all have to play an active role to be able to deliver on that, so that your inwards match your outwards.
I would +1 on that, by the way. I think for me, and it might feel like a really simple one, but I think it's often forgotten, is get really, really clear on your audience, who that person is, where he, she, they are showing up, how much money they want to spend, other brands that they're engaging with, what they're worried about, what they get happy about. Get so granular and specific around who that individual is. It will make your life a lot clearer when it comes to creative, to content, to what your communication, who your communication partner should be, what your life cycle looks like, where your user acquisition targeting should be focused. And I think one of the problems that we're seeing now is that there is so much opportunity. You know, Anjali spoke through lots of different groups, and all of them have different needs. The consistent thread is that they all care about similar spaces, whether it's mental well-being or sustainability, but how you target them and how that communication is tailored and adapted is really, really important to it being successful within that channel. So if you are focusing on baby boomers, do not show up in TikTok, because that is the channel where other brands are being successful. Or if you are, you know, priming yourself on being a sustainability brand, make sure that you're really cognizant of what part of sustainability that audience want to understand and have as part of their everyday lives. And I think often we can get so overly ambitious, which is a brilliant thing, about all of the opportunity, but staying really clear, targeted and tailored with your audience group, for me, is the ultimate key to growth and success. And you can always move on to another group after that, but our budgets aren't limitless. And so staying really focused on that is integral for us, especially to growth.
And Anjali, the final word from you.
All right. Yes, to add on to both of these ladies, I would just say it's about being authentic. And this is something that consumers want. We've seen this reflected in the data over and over again. It's going to be one of the massive things for 2022. Real people, real stories, talking about that vulnerability, overcoming challenges. So it doesn't matter if you're focusing on mental health, sustainability, online delivery, and shopping. Try to be as authentic as you can. Again, it's not just about your product, it's about connecting with consumers and how they feel and think about your brand, your campaign, the message that you want to put into the world.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. It's all about connecting with the feeling. And I think, marketing tactics really do need to cater to these priorities, identities, lifestyles of consumers. And I think it's really hit home the power of consumer data, understanding who they are. You can't ignore these signals coming through. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Brings us to the end of our session. And thank you so much, Anjali, Louise, Visha, for, so many fantastic insights and some great advice there. Lots of inspiration and food for thought for marketers as we navigate the next year and beyond. So thank you again. And thank you to everyone who tuned in today. Hopefully you enjoyed that as much as I did. And if you'd like to find out more, visit latana.com. See you soon.